I've stolen Will Davison's steering wheel for a little supercar show and tell. These are pretty cool. First of all, made by Max Pappas Industries. Max was a very well-known and successful IndyCar driver, and he's got an operation now that does a whole bunch of racing steering wheels. So nice and light, it's beautiful to touch, but the important part is all this stuff here. So let's just rattle through it. So you're probably familiar with the full course yellow procedure for supercars. So when that's called by James Taylor, the race director in race control, there's a 15-second countdown and you activate this, and once it gets to the end of the 15 seconds and the car's below the prescribed speed, it'll sit there at that pace. Just off to the right of that, lights. It's just simply lights on, lights off, and generally the drivers will either flash them or turn them on if they're qualifying or there's traffic or there's some other reason to try and signal somebody. Over here you've got a couple of options in terms of the radio. So it's a push-to-talk radio and you're speaking to a microphone just in front of your mouth, tucked in behind the helmet. And here on the back you can see I've got a paddle. Be lovely if that was a little Formula One style paddle shift, but it's used for radio. Actually, I like the whole idea of manual, quite frankly. Drink bottle, self-explanatory, push the button and then you'll get a drink, remembering that it's very, very hot inside the cockpit of a supercar. This little button up here, the brake button, when you push that, it activates what's described as a line locker. So at the start of the race, when you get yourself into position, you pull up, you put your foot on the brake pedal, and then you push that button, and it holds pressure in the brake system. And then you go through the start procedure, and then you release it when the lights change, and away you go, and it depressurizes the system. And that means that you can load the clutch up against the brake and then get the most efficient possible start. Now, if you're signalling to come into the pit lane or you're trying to indicate to another competitor, then you've got these little indicators that are on both sides of the steering wheel. That's pretty straightforward. Wiper gives you options for either intermittent, low speed or a high speed wipe. This one's pretty interesting because in the modern Gen 3 supercar, it's a fly-by-wire throttle. It's probably a topic for another day, but there's no physical wire connection, no cable between your right foot and the engine. There's just commands to the engine control unit, and there's 10 different map options here. And you can see, if you look really, really closely, you can see numbers down the bottom. So Will's able to turn this, and those numbers represent different maps. And that'll give him a different throttle treatment, depending on whether it's wet or whether the grip conditions are high, whether the tyre conditions good, bad or indifferent. You can change the way you and the engine and the tyre interacts with the racetrack. The scroll button gives you a line of information at the bottom of the display. The fuel button here does nothing at the moment, but there's provision in the future for different fuel mapping, which supercars have had in the past with earlier generation cars. And the mode switch here enables you to shift between the pages on the Motec dash unit from practice to qualifying to race, or even if you're an engineer or mechanic, there's a startup function there as well. And looking further over the left-hand side of the steering wheel, you've got the scroll button down here. You've also got the indicator that I talked about, a reset button, which is handy if you see something you don't like, you can get rid of it. High water temperature or something else that bothers you, you can reset it. Engineers don't like that. This one here is an interesting one. So the ACK button is an acknowledge button. So in case you've got a comms issue and you want to acknowledge a radio message, you just hit this one. But the other beauty of this is that you can use it as a track marker. So if you've got a particular issue at turn 3 on a track, on entry, apex or exit, there's something you don't like about the car and you want to expand on the discussion later with your engineer, you hit this, it puts a marker in the data, and then you can expand that information out and then determine whatever it is, ride control, braking, engine performance, whatever the issue may be. And finally, there's a couple of other little things here from an ergonomic standpoint as well. You might wonder what the little band is at the top. It's just so that you've got a visual reference as to precisely where the steering wheel is. Sounds like no big deal, but it's actually quite important in terms of your eye, hand, foot coordination and how you feel, hear and see what's going on with your race car. And this one that Will's got's a rubberized solution on the outside of the wheel. And for those gentlemen that like the finer things in life, you can also get a suede version.